And you can see that there. Let me do one more thing. All right. Good evening, everyone. It's been a little while since we've had a full meeting. We've had some committee calls last week, and then we had a number of other calls related to school business. And so I appreciate everyone leaning in over the past month and a half, 2 months to get some of these initiatives continued momentum. So for tonight's mission moment, I want to share a few highlights from our celebration of Black history over the month of February. We had a number of noteworthy events throughout the month, including outside performances and a pop-up shop at our high school, and a host of faculty-led presentations at our middle school, in which our colleagues and educators of color led presentations on a range of topics pertaining to Black history. And that includes Black superheroes, Black poets, Black athletes, the topic of colorism, and the Black art movement, to name a few. A highlight for me was our middle school assembly on the 15th of February, which was, in my mind, one of the most exceptional assemblies at a school that I've ever taken part of, and I mean that. Over the course of the hour that we had together on that Wednesday afternoon, we had 3 student performances. So I think you see our step team or dance team performing on the screen now. See, there is an active coach or teacher on the left by the door, amped up, fired up as her students perform. So we had 3 student performances. We had a staff member perform. We had a young local entrepreneur speak. This entrepreneur is a friend of one of our colleagues, and he recently opened up a skating rink very close to the Barclays Center that's doing really well. And so it was great to hear his story. We had a drumline perform. We had an outside dance group perform, and 2 students recite words of wisdom from prominent Black historical figures. For me, what made the event so special was just like the balance that was struck between like student talent voice, teacher talent voice, and community talent voice, which to me made for a very authentic and truly powerful moment for our community, and a learning moment and moment of celebration. So what I wanted to do today is share with you a short clip of one of the students who spoke toward the end of the assembly. Her name is London, and she's in the 7th grade, and she recounted the lyrics of a song by the singer and civil rights activist, Nina Simone. So let me go to her. And I'm going to unshare for a moment to make sure this works. And then I'm going to listen to Chris and share my screen. And when I do, I'm going to share sound. Oh no. Zoom is coming after me. That may have worked. Here's Earl. All right, give me a thumbs up if you can hear London when I hit play.
You are young, gifted, and Black. We must begin to tell our young, there's a whole world waiting for you. Yours is the quest that's just begun. When you're feeling really low, there's a truth that you should know. When you're young, gifted, and Black, your soul's intact. How to be young, gifted, and Black. Oh, how I've longed to know the truth. There are times when I would look back and be hunted by my youth. Oh, but my joy of today is that we can all be proud to say, being young, gifted, and Black is where it's at. It's where it's at. It's where it's at.
All right, London. Cool. And folks, there you have it, our mission moment for tonight.
Thanks for sharing that, Josh.
Yeah, no,
Thank you. That was nice. You want to just keep rolling?
yeah, let's keep rolling. Head of school report. I got to work on this transition from mission moment to boring head of school report. I don't know. Change up the agenda in some way. All right. I'm going to share my screen again so you guys can all see this report. And you have it in your inbox too, if you'd like to take a closer look. Mm. Okay. All right. So for this month, I guess I just would start by saying it is both a really exciting and thrilling time, as you just sort of saw some clips from the past month, as well as a really demanding and sometimes stressful time as we sort of figure out how to balance planning for next year, a lot of things in the air, as well as do our very best work for our kids and families and students now. So I'll sort of start there. I think that's the theme as I think about just team senior leadership meeting today, what's on the agenda, et cetera. In terms of headlines, I do want to share out a couple of things that I think are really about intentionally building a culture of pride. And I mean that both academically and extracurricularly. And I believe this is kind of fully in line with our mission. So I'm just going to selectively talk about a couple of highlights here. So I think they are in terms of like athletics right now. We've had a really great winter season. One of the highlights there is that our girls basketball team was undefeated and went to the city finals this past week. Very close game to a very, very well coached and mature and seasoned team. We lost by 2 down the stretch, but the team played hard. We had over 10 faculty at the game who made it on a Wednesday afternoon after a full day of work. And so just a really good moment for kids, really great season for kids where they just poured their heart out. So I'll name that as sort of one highlight from the past month that gets at this theme of building pride and that being a part of the culture that we're developing. Secondly, with our speech and debate team, we had kids recently compete at UPenn. We had a kid, one of our very talented debaters, qualify for nationals, which will be happening later this spring in Kentucky. We had Malcolm Gladwell practice with our team in late January, and we may be holding a debate summer camp at our high school, as well as opening up to our middle school this coming year. So I think some other sort of aspects of just like learning, which is really authentic, where kids are kind of putting forth their full effort and doing so without hesitation. Third, I mentioned and shared with you some of the festivities that we took part in this past month, where kids were front and center, again, showing off their very best talents and themselves. And so some really great things going on. We had some kids this past week, take part in college trips to Medgar Evers and Vassar, some really good photos of that in last week's scoop. So that's just about exposure and having kids be able to think about what's possible over the coming years. And then I think finally, in terms of student empowerment, we have launched peer mediation at both sites, which I think is going to be really great for our school in thinking about how we provide leadership opportunities for kids. And then more concretely, provide opportunities for our kids to help others in working through conflicts. A really important skill in my mind to think about just being an adult. And then finally, we did launch our middle school National Honor Society with, I think, around 30 kids who qualified and took part in that ceremony at the middle school this past month. Really great ceremony and lots of proud parents in the stands. And so I just go back to like, we're trying to do a lot this year intentionally around giving kids opportunity to show confidence and be prideful in just what they do at our school, that being academic and extracurricular. And I think there's a Venn diagram where there's overlap between the two. And I think some of these examples are rich in that overlap. So I'll name that in terms of headlines, some more bright moments to share. In addition to that, tonight, we're going to talk about all these things in the school leader report at different moments. So I'm going to hold off on the retention stuff, which is next. We'll talk about that during the strategic planning portion of tonight's meeting. We're going to talk about some academics and IA2 during the SLC share out portion of the meeting. Sorry for getting dizzy as I scroll down the page here. And let's see. A couple of headlines with regard to miscellaneous updates that I will share. One being that we did receive our draft renewal visit report from SED just over a week ago. I shared with committees some of the updates there. Jim and I had a discussion about that earlier this week. Overall, solid report, not a lot that was unexpected. We have provided a response to SED as requested, and I can share out some details on that response during executive session tonight. In addition to that, I want to bring to this board I'm back. I want to bring to you all our 7th annual career fair. It's something we do every year in which adults from our community come in and talk with their kids about what they do professionally and share with our kids just what their day looks like, why they do what they do, the joys of the job, the hardships of the job. Our kids get to learn about those aspects of work and then think about themselves in the shoes of people presenting. And so really great event. Eric does a solid job with every year. It's intimate. It's meant to sort of be conversational in nature. And so we're trying to get 40 folks to take part in this. We've done that in the past. And we've listed out sort of the areas of fields that we've had in the past that would be intriguing. And so they're listed there from technology to design to science, the arts to law. Yes, folks, law, humanities, related fields, et cetera. So would love to get a couple of you all taking part in this. If you've got free time, midday on a Wednesday to come by. There's great food in Williamsburg to get some lunch afterward. Sal, tell us about how amazing your experience was last year during this fair. We're trying to let's set a goal for ourselves. 3 people from this board to take part. Hands up when you're ready. Sal, go ahead.
It's always fun. I'm always amazed by how smart these kids are because I've been doing it for years. And like years ago when I was still consulting, I went through this whole discussion about like consulting and assisting, basically talking about data analysis. And these kids, they're like, so you basically just play with numbers is what one of them said. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Last year, I was talking to them about developing real estate. And the life of a developer is basically you're sort of telling people what to do. And they saw right through that. After I described what developing real estate was, they were like, you just tell other people what to do. What do you actually do? And I thought that was very sharp of them. But yeah, it's super fun. I think if you have the ability to make it there, you should. I'll definitely try to do it myself again.
Oh, great. Thank you for that, Sal. Good pitch. And so there is a link in the school leader report. I can send it out. Maybe Chris, if you're on, you could even send it out to this team tonight. And again, it'd be great to get a couple of folks in to our school on the 5th of April. That's a Wednesday from 12 to 2. Again, great food in Williamsburg afterward if you're free. We've got Wi-Fi too. If you had a conference call or something going on, you need to jump into a trailer and take that. All right, enough's enough. In addition to that, I guess other updates here. I'll talk a bit about downward expansion related stuff during the ECPC portion of the report out for today. We'll go into executive session there too. And then I'll report out, I think you all know this, but we did gain approval from Build NYC's board of directors to issue bonds in the purchase of 584 Driggs. And so that's still kind of a work in progress. We're going hard, but a nice interim win there. So more to say during the executive session tonight. Are there any questions about aspects of the school leader report that I didn't mention that we may not talk about later on? Cool. So back to you, Jim.
Yes, to the dashboard.
Yeah, let's go dashboard. All right. I'll reshare my screen here. And with that, we're going to spend time with about a half dozen of these dashboards. Why didn't that show up properly? I'm not sure, but let's try it again. Dashboard. Oh, it's because it's not. It should be fun. Can now see. Can you see my dashboard? You can? I can.
It's really tiny.
Yeah. Move to bottom. I'll try it one more time. Then I go up. And then Chris, if you got it, you can share. Ah, there we go. No. Still no luck, huh?
I see it.
We can
Good.
see it. It's just tiny if you want to zoom in on the
when
plus
you
arrow
say
on
tiny,
top.
you don't mean tiny. You mean just sort of tiny. Okay, I'll make it a bit bigger. That's a little better, right, Chris?
There you go.
Yeah,
All right.
maybe even a little bit more. Yeah,
A little more, says Chris Dosher. Here we go.
perfect.
All right.
All
So
right.
with that, we're going to share out some updates on maybe 5 of the data points in this dashboard. Chris, why don't you start us off and give us a quick update on student enrollment?
So table 1, we're looking at current student enrollment as of March 9th. So it's current. We have a likely enrollment of 535 students enrolled across both sites. Since the January meeting, Unity Middle School has lost 3 students on net. Unity High School has gained 1 student on net. Overall, as a full 6 to 12 school, Unity has lost 2 students net. We're working at 98% of our target enrollment, and we're over our budget enrollment of 519.
So in addition to that, we're, again, as Chris said, 98% sort of like full or at capacity with current enrollment. With regard to student attrition, at this point in time, we're on track. About 5% of kids have moved on over the course of the year. Our goal is no more than 10%. That's just based on historical numbers and what we think is about right.
And just to note, 6 of the 7 students that have left Unity since the January meeting is because they left New York City or they moved further away from the school.
Cool. Thanks for that, Chris. Alex will talk a bit about finance a bit later on. In terms of student attendance right now, I've said this before, but I think the effects of kind of COVID are still kind of like posing some challenges in getting to those pre-COVID attendance numbers that we had in 2019, which is closer to 92%. Right now we're at 86%. And so we have revised numbers at both sites. And so current goals for the high school, something within 5 percentage points of 92, so 87% or above is what we're aiming for and closing out the year. That's still ambitious, but we're going to make a go of it. And at the middle school, closer to 90%. So some reconfiguring here based on where we are now, and then our kind of desire to continue to make gains with having as many kids in school each and every day as possible. I'll skip over the tiered stuff. This is just a way of looking at attendance in different kind of tranches or groupings where our interventions are then meant to kind of tailor to those different levels of need. And so this data feeds into the data you saw above. With regard to out of school suspension, I will say that this is a red flag for us as of now. We have had more suspensions this month at both sites than what we've seen in the past. I think a couple of things represent or tell some of the story. I don't think it's sort of individualistic to our school or like something where we have to sort of step back and say, man, something's wrong at Unity. But there are things that we can do at our school to help decrease the number of incidents that are happening that are worthy or where suspension is the right path. So I think we've got, in the headlines, you've got, kids, people still kind of struggling and it manifesting itself in different ways. And one of those ways in which it kind of comes about is people having a hard time working through conflicts. And so we have had more of that sort of thing this year than we had in prior years. And it's still sort of like present. In addition to that, I think recreational drugs are kind of more present and confusing and complex than perhaps where we were a few years ago and thinking about how we negotiate that. And then I think third, in terms of some factors here, a good portion of these, I would say half of the things that have happened that have been kind of serious and resulted in a suspension are happening after school or after hours. And so not in our building. Things feel okay in our building with regard to sort of safety, but there are things happening outside our school, more so at our high school, that that are then causing for us to have to react because it does influence our community during the school day too. And so those things are at play, and I think causing some numbers to increase more so than what we'd like to see. And so I think for us, a few ways in which we're trying to curb that, in addition to just like our sort of policies and kind of like our design, where there's just like a lot of adults in the building meant to sort of care and help kids out so they're making good decisions. Some other things where we've been doing, I mentioned this recently, we have kicked off peer mediation at both sites. So the idea being that kids are going to be powerful voices for others and working through conflicts proactively or after the fact, so they don't happen again. I'll share out some numbers on participation in a moment, but we've got a lot of kids doing things after school. So just keeping kids busy and occupied and doing things that they enjoy and think are cool, that's helpful in kind of curbing boredom or instances where kids might act out in ways that aren't positive. So I think we're going to continue to go hard on curriculars and activities and encouraging kids to take part in them. And I think it's worthy of us thinking about mentoring. With the ECPC, I've talked to that team about some initiatives we have in play there, and in some discussions with DOE folks about how to do that at our schools at charter. So I think mentoring has some promise if we're able to make that happen. So those are some things going down with these numbers, kind of in a place where I think they deserve more attention than what we're giving them right now. Are there any questions there?
I mean, Josh, the only thing I'd note is that this is sort of marginally worse given that you have lower attendance, right? So it's sort of more kids suspended on a smaller number of kids actually in school, right? So it sounds right. It's something we need to think about. Is the drug stuff mostly under other?
We've had, like we've had at the middle school, which we haven't typically had, like vape related issues where kids are bringing them in from their parents and bring them in, and like depending on kind of how the interaction happens with them, it may result in suspension. And we're rethinking some of that about what's the appropriate sort of response for that kind of thing, and we just haven't had to. Society's a little different than it was even 5 years ago. So those sorts of things come up.
Okay.
Or have come up.
Thanks.
And I guess, maybe I'll name this, and I don't know if the board wants to get into a discussion here. So I welcome your thoughts, but we have had, our stance has been, if there's a safety issue and we feel like it impacts our community, if it even happens outside of school and after hours, we address it, and we address it with families and with kids. And as I said, that is resulting in more suspensions being enacted than perhaps if we didn't take that route. And there are other schools and school leaders that take that stance. Outside the building, we don't care. And so that's our present stance. We'll continue to go with it, but it does cause for some differences in data across schools. All right.
Well, if you were to ignore what happens outside the classroom, would you see a spike inside the classroom? Who knows? You can't.
That's
counterfactual.
Yeah, we think so.
Yeah.
So I think I wanted to spend some time on that today. Chris, let's talk about student recruitment. It's the new season. We are in it. 23, 24, here we come. Where are we now?
Absolutely. So March and April are typically some of the busiest times of the year for student recruitment because charter schools in New York State are not allowed to have their lottery before April 1st. So a lot of the recruitment is happening February or March, and then April is as folks are accepted, they enroll for the school for the upcoming school year. At present, we have 150 middle school applications for next school year. The vast majority of them are for sixth grade, 125, and then 12 7th grade applications for next year, 13 8th grade applications for next year. So overall 150 middle school applications for next year. That's 20 more applications than where we were as of March 9th, 2022. That's a significant jump. At the high school, we currently have 148 ninth grade applications for next year. These are 8th graders from the outside world, not from our middle school. That data is not here. 19 10th grade applications, 11th grade applications. So we have 174 high school applications from the outside world for next year. That's a drop from where we were last year. I attribute of 34 applications. I attribute that to one of our biggest outside middle feeder schools has a new guidance counselor that I haven't built a stronger relationship with. So last year where they were handing us students as far as getting students excited for Unity High School, this year we don't have that connection as much with that middle school. There was a high school fair just this last weekend of charter high schools in Brooklyn that we participated. Only 30 students showed up fully for that fair, and there were 6 high schools at that fair. Throughout the next few weeks, I'm planning on continuing building relationships with our middle feeder schools, continuing building our existing relationships with our elementary feeder schools, ideally to get as many applications in before the lottery, and then after the lottery, we'll have our accepted to Unity dinner.
One note beyond, go ahead, Maria.
Sorry, on the related topic, I think we'd identified when we talked about it, the sort of internal pipeline from 8th to 9th being kind of a critical area of focus. What are you guys doing differently this year there?
Absolutely. That's one of the things we've been talking about quite a bit. We're setting up right now, we're setting up an alumni visit for both our high school alumni and current high school students to come visit the 8th graders in their classrooms. We haven't done that in years past. We have conferences this week at our middle school site where we'll be meeting with our 8th grade families who might have applied to DOE schools. The DOE high school results just came out last Thursday, and I created comparison letters that show key data points, qualitative and quantitative, comparing this is the school your child got accepted to, this is Unity High School. So having real conversations with those families who might be considering an outside high school as opposed to Unity High School, including graduation rate as one of those metrics.
Okay, thank you.
And so right now, Marion, you get I had the same consideration. So right now, we're hoping to have 70 students in our 9th grade. And so we're assuming that maybe 35 of our students come from our middle school to our high school. That's 50% of our 8th grade. We'd like to increase that to 65% for this year, which would decrease the number of seats for students outside of Unity. And so I think Chris has named some of the things that perhaps we've done in the past, perhaps we haven't. I would say that the biggest thing we've done this year to ramp up numbers for retention from 8th grade to 9th grade is our programming, where we're much more intentional about bridging experiences, creating connections, making mentors out of our kids at our high school for our kids at the middle school. So our basketball team's practicing together, our girls basketball team at the high school taking in a middle school game, vice versa. Our peer mediators having a summit in the spring together in which they're able to kind of interact and meet each other and think about what's possible at our high school. And it happening with our National Honor Societies too. So I think those connections to me like make our high school cool for our middle school kids, which then results in more of our middle school kids coming to our high school. So I think those are powerful. And we've got a few other sort of like initiatives in play that I think are creative and will increase the number of 8th graders going to our 9th grade this year. So I expect that number to be closer to 65% when we sit down and look at the numbers in the fall.
Great, thank you.
All right. So other things just to quickly dive into. So I think with regard to just participation at the board level, we didn't have quorum last month. And I think it was probably because I shifted the meeting around. So my apologies there for folks who have busy schedules and just couldn't make it work. So here we are tonight. We have quorum tonight, and that's just where things stand. So thank you for making time on a Tuesday night. And finally, I think there are two other updates I'll mention. So student participation, I mentioned keeping kids really busy with cool things to do. 75% of our students at our middle school are taking part in after school activities, whether it's athletics, whether it's our clubs, whether it's St. Nick's, our partnering kind of group that has kids both in the summertime, during vacations, and after school doing enriching things. At our high school, we had 48, just under half our kids taking part in clubs and athletics. So kids doing a lot of stuff during the extended day. I think that means good things for kids with experiences, exposures, and keeps kids from getting bored. Things stand. In general, the number of IEPs that are up to date, the number of IEPs that are fully met or partially met are in good form. The one number that we're just keeping an eye on is making sure that our IEPs are up to date at the high school. Right now, that's 83% of our IEPs. The reason for that is just because the DOE or CSC to sign off on them. So we're just waiting for that kind of like formality, but it doesn't impact like the services that kids should be getting as written in their IP or the services they are getting. And I think that's it with regard to updates on our monthly dashboard. So I'll pause there. Thank you, Chris, for the report up.
All right, you want to keep rolling?
Yeah, let's keep rolling. Our strategic plan. We're going back to the school leader report tonight. Which is somewhere in the mix. There it is. And I think just strategy wise tonight, I want to talk about something really important, which is people and keeping really good people on the team and doing the good work on behalf of our kids and families. So I'm going to share out kind of where we are now and what we're doing to maximize retention among staff and faculty in the coming year. You've seen this analysis. We did it last year. I think it was helpful. So we're not doing anything much different with regard to like what we're looking at and how I'm sharing this out with you all. So each year in January, we administer a survey, which gives us a sense of what folks are thinking about for the coming year, 23-24. It's a quick survey. We ask staff members whether they're planning to return on a 4-point scale, and the multiple choices are yes, maybe no, or no. And then we ask folks in the event that you are not yes, what would get you, what would kind of like increase you by 1, or what would get you to yes, is probably a better way of saying that, more accurate way of saying that. And folks are pretty honest about what they would need, or perhaps if it just ain't going to work out and there's some things outside of our control, it being just something that they say, hey, there's not much that can change here for me. So it's useful kind of feedback. The 2 slides below provide a summary of our responses. The response rate was 90-something%, so quite high, with a couple of stragglers who we've reached out to and will have in-person conversations with. And from a target standpoint, we always seek to keep 80% of our folks. And that is also the folks that's in general, or all encompassing of folks that we brought on this past year, we'd like to have back. And so obviously we make choices about who we offer agreements to in the coming year. And in a given year, there may be some people who aren't offered a renewal agreement. So even with that, we seek to keep 80% of our team intact from year to year. So when looking at the data, just to spell it out for y'all, this first table provides a summary of responses overall and at the site level. So all is sort of in these 2 columns where you get a sense of where people responded. So 52% of our staff responded, I'm coming back, yes, as of January. 29% responded, maybe yes. 11% responded, maybe no, and 7% responded, no. And so at the Site level, there is a difference. At the middle school, 66% of respondents said that they're coming back or maybe coming back. 90% at the high school said that they were coming back or maybe coming back. As I look at these numbers, while they appear to be vastly different, I think as things shake out and looking at individual responses, it wouldn't surprise me if what happens is a retention level within 10 percentage points of one another at the middle school and high school. We've got a number of maybe no's at the middle school that I think with some dialogue may change things up. At both sites, we've got a few people that are just moving away. I would say 3 to 4 that are just moving or going back to grad school where there just isn't the kind of way to make it work, and that's all right. So we are looking at these numbers kind of closely and thinking about conversations and possibilities for the coming year, with again the end game being to keep our talented folks. In terms of hiring, this number seems big. It makes me a little anxious, but I think just given these numbers and given historical data, we anticipate needing to hire roughly 30 folks in the coming year. And so that is a lot of work, particularly in a time in which there are shortages in this field, and it's competitive. So this takes up some time and some energy, and we are gearing up for it. So that's where things stand now. I'm going to talk about the survey responses for some subgroups in a moment. Are there any questions or insights on this data or findings from the team?
I think the sort of obvious question is, even if you're within 10 points of each other, what's accounting for the difference in middle versus high school, right? It just seems that if you look at the numbers, there's just not that many people at the high school that are not coming back, right?
Yeah.
Or thinking about not coming back. And what is it that seems to be more successful there?
Yeah. I think a good question, Lauren. I think in addition to what I've said, if you recall kind of conversations of experiences last year, there was some challenge and some struggle, kind of like staff culture wise at the high school. And I think that our principals at the high school have done a really impressive job of riding that ship last year to this year. And so I think these results are a reflection of some of that work that they've done on a positive note to kind of like create buy-in, create some excitement and energy at the high school that wasn't there. And so they're course correcting. At the middle school, I think they were working from an area of strength and haven't had to maybe do some of that deliberate work, and are pushing things in a way that feels a little different. And so I think that has resulted in some of these numbers being different as well. And so some of this is just about the way in which we lead the ship at both sides.
Do you know whether the numbers are markedly different? That breakdown is different from what you got last year, same time?
Yeah, let's talk about it. We're going to get in there in just a moment. If I don't get there, repose that question, but I think we'll get there just 2 slides down.
Okay, great.
So with regard to responses between teachers and admin, I think the findings are relatively similar, and that hasn't always been the case. I can remember past years where perhaps the admin rate was higher than the teacher rate, and that brought forward some good questions about the why there that doesn't exist here. And so anyway, good to kind of see what's there, and if there's nothing there, that's okay. In terms of bright spots here, so I just like having these conversations early because it sets us up to think about our openings and then prepare and get the word out early. And then it allows for us to engage in conversations with staff members just about needs, possibilities, et cetera, because we're a small school and we can make perhaps some changes that are good for school and for individual staff in ways that traditional more veteran district schools perhaps cannot. So that's an advantage for us. Last year, based on just our historical data, we anticipated a retention rate of about 65%. And we ended up at 74%. And I think that was a result of some of the individual conversations that we had. And so I think those conversations matter. So we will continue to use them and have them this year too. And with regard to challenges, I'll say that we're probably a bit lower in what we anticipate this year than our goal of 80%. So if things worked out in the same way this year as it did last year, we anticipate maybe being somewhere in the mid 70s versus 80%. So, that's under the goal that we've set. So we're aware of that. And then in terms of factors at play and in some of the responses we received, particularly to the second question of, if not yes, what would get you to yes? Considerations put forward were salary, not surprising, career trajectory and opportunity, some of that being individualized based on where people are in their specific role at the school. There were some nuanced concerns or frustrations this year put forward, like good to kind of be aware of those, but we're a school of 100+ staff, and so at any point in time there are going to be people that are going through some stuff, and so this survey allows for us to hear some of that stuff. And then finally, some external factors needed at home, and so moving back home, that kind of thing comes up. So I guess they're challenges, but again, good to know where people stand. In terms of the actions, and it'd be nice to hear your take on whether these make sense to you, or if you've got ways of making them stronger. Would love to hear that too. We've analyzed the data. I'm sharing it out tonight. And so I think our next step is with school leaders coming up with communication plans, where we've embarked on some of those already. In terms of salary, I am doing some work right now and thinking about our staffing and budget for the coming year, given our anticipated enrollment. And so that is in the works. And then with regard to hiring, we've begun that process and have a number of positions posted and have a system for checking in on those and getting the word out to those who are leading interviews on a weekly basis. So the systems here are in operation. So those are the things we're doing now. And there are some best practices that we're also kind of borrowing and stealing. I think there's a webinar tomorrow that Chris or myself or Michelle may take part in that'll provide some best practices on doing things. Chris is taking part, and I think at least one other a few weeks ago. So always open to new ideas and creative ones. Any insights from team about what you see here, or perhaps based on your line of work and what you have experienced hiring wise recently?
I would just say asking around, I've been through this process for my daughter, and it's a big problem across the board, all schools, even the ones that are able to pay substantially more than we are. People leaving the industry, people, leaving New York for various reasons. It's tough. So I just, hopefully your game plan to tackle this thing is good, because it's not just you. It's there was one school on the Upper East Side that can pay a lot more than we can, and she was telling me, the head of school told me 40% of her teachers there are new over the last 2 years. 40% are new, and so it is what it is. Can you scroll up a bit? Is it true that half of it's 50-50 split between admin and teachers?
So here, essentially,
50-50.
the way we're looking at this is about 80% of teachers have said yes or maybe yes. And
in terms of the just staffing, 43 admin versus 53 teachers seems extremely high on the admin.
Admin means anyone who doesn't teach. So that's anyone from school safety to front office to a social worker. So anyone who's to a department chair who actually does teach, but that's not their sole role. So teacher just refers to those folks who carry a 5-course at the high school, 4-course at the middle school load.
So Jim, about 10 of these folks here are department chairs and teach a partial schedule.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, how do you go about I
And
think
I would
this
say,
issue is
and I would say you're kind of you're kind of like you're noticing here. Your observation is, I think, a good one, in that I think by design we do have a hearty staff to student ratio, and we've got, an academic counseling team and a social work team that I think kind of adds to the amount of people we have who are not teachers. But I think just given the terrain, it's helped us in supporting kids beyond the classroom and in the classroom to be successful. And so, I think that would be my kind of like counter to, hey, you get a lot of them in here.
yeah. I mean, as long as they're spending time with kids, because part of that you look at and say, hey, it's why don't you just co-teach
Yeah.
50% more classes, and shuffle people around. But if they are spending time, educating, then I'm fine with that. It just seems high. I think I brought this up before. I saw my experience with Cal Berkeley, who I stopped giving money to. The ratio just got through the roof. I mean, it's almost 50-50 now. An administrator compared to somebody in the classroom, and the average direct reports for people on the admin is 2. It's like, what? What are you doing? But there's tenure that fits. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. This is different. So as long as they're spending time with the kids, I'm however you categorize them is fine with me.
Mm-hmm. Were you going to say something else? I think I may have interrupted you. Maybe you were talk about Cal.
Yeah, just a couple things. I mean, what's the strategy? How do you go about recruiting this number of people? Because I don't think the problem's going away anytime soon. Do you have to change how you do? How are you recruiting right now? What's the methodology? Is it LinkedIn? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so we are using kind of like the biggest venue in Indeed to kind of get the word out. And so we've got postings there. We do pay for some of those postings, so they get more eyes on them, depending on the position. And so that's there. We have looked into venues like ZipRecruiter, but felt like they weren't worth it based on our analysis, and at least one other kind of venue similar to that, where we experimented with a couple of groups over the course of the month, didn't get a whole lot of like benefit from it, and so didn't continue with it. We do internal referrals and offer I think a relatively very generous referral bonus among staff. And I think right now we got at least one candidate in the mix through a referral at this point in time at our high school. And so during various times of the year, we may get people to sort of say, hey, I've got folks who I'd like to kind of have sign on and come in. So that's been good for us in the past. It wasn't as fruitful last year for whatever reason. So I think those are our major 2 ways to kind of tackle this. We haven't had a lot of benefit in going to career fairs. I think, Chris mentioned a student career fair a little while ago. It's even quieter at adult teacher kind of career fairs. And so, we tend to just be try to be very quick and responsive once we get a hit or someone says, I'm interested in hearing about your school. So, systems wise, I look at the incoming applications twice a week, and then Chris follows up if we find someone promising. Chris then has a quick call. He rates folks on that call using kind of a rubric and a questionnaire, and if those folks make a certain level, we pass it on to our site principals, who then set up interviews, and that can happen within a few days.
Okay.
But if you've got suggestions, let me know. I think, and they run the gamut. Chris took part in a webinar for hiring a few weeks ago, and one of the best practices or creative practices put forward was a 4-day work week with a remote day. And so
welcome to the problem. Yeah.
Was it for schools, Josh?
This was a charter school, I think, up in the Bronx. Yeah.
Yep. That doesn't help. I look, for what it's worth, I think recruiters are generally worthless. We just had a board meeting for one of my companies and nearly fired the COO because he hired a bunch of people using a recruiter. Recruiting fee was $25,000 per. I think 5 people he hired, and only 4 lasted, and we couldn't get a refund. So I don't have good experience historically there.
Mhm.
But I think, how about getting people right out of school? What's the process there?
Getting people what?
Right out of school.
Oh, look, it's you there are some schools that are really built for that in the way in which they run their schools by design, and they have sort of systems in play for training up people very quickly and then having them stay there for 2 or 3 years and then go back to school. It's for us as a mom and pop, I think we're strategically better off in having people around for a longer period of time and not investing really intensively in someone who's going to be around for 2 years. And so in those 2 years, those first 2 years can be choppy. I think most early teachers can say that about their experiences. And so I think we found it not to be best for our kids to go that route at wide scale. Now, in any given year, we do have a couple of teachers who are newer. And I'm thinking of a couple of folks at our high school now who are in their second year, and they're very solid. So it can work out, but I think we're not built to sort of take mass numbers.
Yeah. No, I got it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I think we were referring to retention. We were at the strategic portion of the meeting tonight. And so we've offered some strategy on where we are now and bringing and keeping talent intact. And so I think, Jeff, we're back to committee reports, and I think,
Sorry,
yeah, no
I don't
worries.
have it open. Can you go ahead and
Alex gets to show off her recording skills. I think she's going to go asynchronous tonight with a quick report out on the month of December. Is that correct, Chris?
Yes, I will share my screen.
All right. And Mario and Jeanette, feel free to chime in if there's something that is worth bringing to the full board that Alex doesn't mention.
Good evening. This is the financial report for the month ended December 2022. As you can see, all of our metrics are well in line with NYSED requirements. We have 103 days cash on hand compared to the 60-day goal that NYSED recommends. The enrollment numbers that we are seeing here are based on the November-December invoice. These will be updated as we move through the year and capture enrollment based on current invoicing. So I believe that there will be an update for the January financial that will be presented next month. Again, because this is the November-December invoice that we're working on, these numbers are the same that we reported at the last board meeting when we were looking at the November financials. We are seeing a projected net income of about $764,000 compared to the budget of $229,000. This is largely attributed to the change in enrollment. We projected a very, very conservative budget with an enrollment of 519 students, and we have exceeded that consistently through the year. We've also had a couple changes in expenses that we have mentioned previously, notably student transportation, the school nurse, and then an additional allocation for clubs for our students. We also had some additional capital expenses related to the purchase of new computers for both students and staff that was not captured in the budget. No notes on the balance sheet, nothing that has significantly changed since the last reporting. When we look at our profit and loss to date, our actual profit net income right now is $168,000 compared to $205,000. This is because we did make an additional rent payment in December because of the holiday. So if we back that out, we would be exceeding our budgeted net income of $205,000, which is what we would expect to see with the increase in enrollment. We do expect that compensation will be at or below budget based on our staffing. Payroll taxes and benefits will also likely be less since they scale with compensation. Our 403B match is currently under budget by about $13,000, and we were pretty conservative in budgeting that. Workers' comp business insurance is included in the general insurance line, so that's why we're seeing that variance. And then we will make a movement at the end of the year for our security salaries that will be moved to a separate line. So we do see a variance over in facility and operations, but that's just a timing issue. As far as projected cash flow, everything looks good for the next several months. I don't anticipate any issues with our cash balances. And that is it for the December financial. Thank you.
So my main comment, Josh, is that I don't want to be looking at December financials in March. And so we need to, as we've discussed during the AFC, so we need to catch up and be, a little more current in our presentation. I think it happened because one of the committee meetings didn't happen and we fell back and we never had 2 months reported at once, but we need to catch up and be more current.
Yeah, I think the reason was we met on January 31st. Didn't meet in February because it was a shorter month and there was a week of vacation, and here we are back at it. So yeah, I think next month we'll have through the end of
February.
yes. Gosh. All right. So that's AFC.
I think, should we punt on DSC?
Yeah, I
until later?
mentioned the Build NYC update, and I think the rest of this we can discuss during executive session.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, let's keep going. ECPC.
Yeah, let's do that. So I'll share out a little bit. I just want to share out, coming from the schooling report. I think it's important to do some of the updates on our efforts to gain approval for a downward expansion. And so under the guidance of our public relations strategist, we've taken a number of steps over the past few months to best position ourselves to gain approval. And I've listed those in the school leader report. I think one new update for us is that I have been in touch with an additional assembly member in our area who is excited about our school and likely to write on our behalf. So that'd be 2 letters of support from local politicians, both people of color who care about the education that we're providing for our kids. And
who was that?
also, so this would be Brian Cunningham.
Okay, I know him.
Yeah,
He's all
yeah.
right.
So spoke with him on Friday, Earl. So I'd love to maybe check in with you on kind of updates there too. But it was a good call.
Did you reach out to anyone from Stephanie's office?
Yeah, we're gonna meet the 24th
Okay.
of March at her office. Look forward to that, and I'm trying to get her to the career fair. Just another
Yeah,
incentive for everyone to come to the career fair to meet Stephanie Zinnerman.
Yeah, I mean, I know her personally. I know her chief of staff real well. Yeah, let's talk offline about that. 'Cause
Yeah,
I
I'd
was
love
just
for
with
you to
her.
maybe join
I was
me
with her.
in Albany in
I was with
April.
her on Thursday. Thursday there was a screening of the 1619 project, and she was the moderator, one of the moderators who spoke. She's really, yeah. We can talk offline.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think we're doing all the things, right? We've got letters from families kind of coming in. We've got letters from staff kind of in the works. We've got letters from our after school program, and so we're trying to sort of convey to the Board of Regents that there's a lot of internal and local support for this. And so there was a Board of Regents meeting yesterday in which a neighboring school, who I know fairly well, both got a full renewal and a green light to expand upward. So they'll be opening a high school next year. And so anyway, I think that perhaps bodes well. We'll see where things go. So that's the latest. And I think I've been in conversations with Earl and with Sal and Trudy about how to make this sort of happen. And so I appreciate you guys for being there and sharing out ideas and offering support. So I think that's the update. We didn't meet this past week formally, but we've been in conversations about some of these things over the past few months, and they're starting to show in good ways.
Great. Okay, SLC.
Yeah. So let's see. A good and long conversation last Thursday with Jeanette and with Lenny and with Josh, who was on for a little while. And so Melissa and I are going to share out IA results today, IA2 results in abbreviated form. And so I'll talk a bit about middle school. Melissa, feel free to chime in if I miss something on middle school, and then you'll take high school. So I'm going to go back to our school leader report because much of what I want to share out is there. And so it keeps it clear for you. Okay. I think we're down here. Yeah, here we are. So let's see. We had interim assessments 2 happen at both sites earlier last month. And so I'm going to share out some data coming from the middle school and then from the high school related to that. And that's both the analysis of the results of how things went, as well as our analysis, some of the action planning happening through that analysis. And so kids at the middle school took a full mock exam in late January in ELA and in math. And so these exams look very much like the exams that they will be taking this spring in April and May. Not all of the material they saw on the exam has been formally taught to them. And so there was some new stuff here too. And so that's happening now and over the coming month before we move into more sort of explicit test prep. But some of the test prep is happening now. In general, the results indicate at the middle school that we will meet our proficiency goals if we're successful in maintaining the percentage of students who demonstrated proficiency on 2 data points, STAR exams and our IAs. So any student that demonstrated proficiency on both of those exams, as well as if we are successful in supporting our students who are now on the cusp based on those exams to demonstrate proficiency on the actual exams in the spring. So here's some data. And I should say, I'm using 2 data points. We really haven't had that kind of data before where we're thinking about, hey, what did STAR show for kids and what did our mock exam show for kids? If kids did well in both those exams, that gives us some confidence that they obtain some of the skills that they're going to be assessed on in the spring in such a way that their grade level skills. And then if kids showed proficiency in one of those 2 exams, there's some promise there. They're coming along, but we'd have greater confidence if they demonstrated proficiency on both of them. And so we're thinking about these sort of slightly differently and how we support them over the course of the next month or 2. So just to talk you through one example of what this table provides, if we look at just 6th grade, our 6th grade students came in on average proficiency level, or 23% of our students in the 6th grade demonstrated proficiency on the state exam as of last year in 5th grade. About 100 students. Our goal for this year is for 45% of them to demonstrate grade level proficiency by the exam. Based on mock exams and STAR exams, 22% of kids we feel are now on track to demonstrate proficiency. 21% we feel are maybe on track, again, based on how they did in the STAR and on the mock exam. And then 57% of our kids are not on track based on those exams at this point in time. So that's how this data reads. If you combine the greens and yellows, we feel like we're in a good place to meet these goals over the course of this year. And so I could go down the line here and look at 7th grade and 8th grade, but you can do the math as well. I think for each of these areas, if those things happen, we will meet our goals in each of the grade levels and for all students and for students with disabilities. So that's the task at hand. I'll talk a bit more about how we're going to do that soon.
Josh, can you just sort of walk through how we get from sort of 22% on track to meeting a goal of 45%?
Yeah. So in this number, I guess these are approximations, but in this case, if all of our students who demonstrated proficiency on the mock exam and STAR exam, this 22% in the 6th grade, as well as the 21% of students who did well enough on one of those 2 exams, if those 2 groups of students demonstrate proficiency on the ELA exam in April, we'll hit 44% or 43% overall, which is, again, I guess in this case, technically it's not 45%, but would get us close to that goal. And so that's just that's the work that's the sort of the calculation we're using to sort of see where we are in comparison to where we want to be.
And you think it's sort of realistic that we can push, in this case, the 21% along enough that if they were good enough on one of the exams, they should be able to get there?
I think that's the great question, right? And I think with caution would say perhaps there are going to be some students who are very close, some students who are very strong within this category, who maybe didn't have a day on one of the exams, but are among our strongest students in the sixth grade. We'd say yes. There may be some students who are close, but may not get there based on the support we provide. And so we're aiming for all of them too, as well as perhaps for some of this 57% to jump to something closer to being proficient. And so in terms of just how we're thinking about these metrics and these goals, we've divided students into a few different groups and then thought of interventions that are slightly different depending on what they've demonstrated. Melissa, if you've got something that maybe is worth adding, I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
Strategically, as a school leader, we've always really focused on these cusp students ahead of testing season. I think that the nature of the tools is that a student who's strong should be able to perform strongly in these exams, but students who are developing in these areas with concerted practice, with the test as a genre, tend to be able to overcome that last hurdle between proficient and nearly proficient. So I think that, yes, we tend to see a bump at the end. It is rare that the mock exam is as high as students actually end up performing. I think what's interesting here is that we're using multiple measures of proficiency and seeing the degree to which they agree. So I think when we look at students in the maybe on track bucket, we see that there is work to do with student proficiency outside of the exam genre. So first, right now, we're focusing on, can students do well in these exams that are meaningful for them? And then are we consistently teaching strong standards aligned material so that students are consistently getting better on both measures?
Okay, thank you.
In just thinking about math in the same fashion, I think the same general findings hold. If we're successful in having our students who are on track perform well in the spring, as well as our students who are maybe on track, get some of that additional attention needed to then get over that hurdle, we will meet our goals across the board, which for math are 30% for all students and 15% for our students with IEPs. You'll see the percentages of where these cohorts came in based on last year's state exam results in this white column. And so I think if we meet these targets, which based on our interim results are within range, we will be soundly demonstrating an impact on these cohorts and kids overall in terms of where they were last year, grade level wise versus this year. And so let's talk a bit about where we are in next steps. So I've been really impressed with this middle school team and some of the work they've done over the past month in devising a fairly comprehensive plan of attack for test prep that builds on what we've done in the past and expands on it. So it's been good to sort of see in action over the past 2 weeks. And so those components include these sort of weekly test preparation data cycles. I want to mention those. I'll talk a bit about those in just a moment. But beyond that, we're beginning to test explicit sort of best practices for test taking, or we're beginning to teach explicit best practices for test taking. And so that's sort of happening now. And we're typically more implicit with that, not doing as much of that kind of explicit work over the course of the year. But here we are in test season now. We're doing more work with small group instruction and centers, and that's mainly meant to be able to more effectively differentiate depending on where kids are. So there's more of that happening in a typical classroom in math and ELA right now. In addition, we're providing kids with more ample independent practice time where they're getting at bats and trying to sort of work through problems, take part in tasks that are right around like their level of kind of proximal development, where they are right now. And so more of that happening. More celebrations happening in terms of kids showing effort and then showing growth. And so lots of signage in the building, lots of core values being exhibited, some prizes here and there, but it's meant to sort of like just provide a boost of confidence and encouragement to kids as they kind of work through a pretty rigorous time of the year. And then we got some stuff happening after school. Got tutoring after school in ELA and in math, and we've got some weekend tutoring happening in math. And so those are some of the things that we've done in the past, and I think we've only gotten better at them this year. With regard to the test prep data cycles, again, the exams are in late April for ELA and in early May for math. Essentially, the cycle looks something like this. So in both ELA and math, there are quizzes administered on Thursdays in ELA and in math. On math, it's on Wednesdays. The results of these quizzes are then uploaded into a database we have, which then provides kind of a grade or a level of how well kids did. This data is then provided or added to a student kind of tracker based on standard. What standards have kids mastered over the course of a given week or given weeks? And then those students who don't exhibit mastery or proficiency on a given standard are then flagged, where extra help is provided to them. And so we have identified a number of students that are focal students or students on the cusp who we are kind of very much aware of how they are doing and how they're doing over the course of the week, such that they're getting support they need in the event that we come up short in providing the necessary support in a given week. So that's the cycle. Michelle's done a really impressive job of kind of making sure that the data and support that Andrea needs to the middle school to have what her team needs is in hand. And so I think that's one maybe plus this year is just having kind of an additional person in Michelle to offer some kind of back office work to get our leaders the information they need to then act on it, as opposed to having leaders have to go out and create it themselves. So that is where we are with test prep cycles. And so I guess our next meeting in April will be after the ELA exam, before the math exam. So we'll have more to say about how things went from our seats. So with that, I'm going to kick things over to Melissa to talk a bit about IA2 at the high school.
I'll talk about this briefly. To Marianne's point, this is January assessments. Our next mock assessments are 2 instructional days away. So this is sort of a report of what has been done. Interim assessments are given at 3/4 points a year. The 4th one is the actual exam that students take across the state or across the world in the case of APs. So we gave our second round of interim assessments in late January. The difference between our first round of interim assessments and our second round of interim assessments is about the breadth and the comprehensiveness of the exams. So this is the first time that students sat down this year for a fully timed 3 or plus hour assessment. So each of these assessments is a minimum of 3 hours. And mocks in format the exams they will take at the end of the year. It is different than the mocks we looked at for the middle grades, in that those were exact replicas of assessments students had taken before. These cover the content that students have seen, but again, are lengthy, and the first time students are taking these kind of against the clock in this manner. The true point of these is really to provide direction on what teachers need to reteach and how they might need to shift their instruction. We don't think that they are a perfect predictor of end of year exam performance based on the fact that they have not covered all content and that students haven't practiced with some of the structures before. And then scroll down to the data portion. what we're looking at here is just our 3 Regents examination classes that are the biggest predictors of graduation for students. So these tend to be the first in the series of categorical Regents students must take in science, math, history, and ELA. We have a number of data points up here for comparison, though we know that comparison is really tricky this year. Last year, those students did take an IA2. They took it after a shift to remote instruction, and some of the exams had been altered to address the shift away from our standard scope. Additionally, we this year had a focus this summer on strengthening our assessment tools. So my chair spent a lot of time doing that work. So we stand by this year's assessment tools the exam students took in a big way. So I would take a grain of salt with year-over-year comparisons. We also have in the second to last column how students actually did on the Regents last year as compared to students across the state in the last column. Based on this, if we had to do early forecasting, which we know would be flawed, we are most concerned about living environment. Oh, going up a little bit, Josh.
No, sorry.
Most concerned about living environment. Algebra 1 is close to on track. An important point here is that we began an accelerated algebra course this year, hoping that we can create a pathway within high school where students can take upper level mathematics classes. Those students did actually take a Regents exam with content they had never ever seen before. So, and this number aggregates both that and our standard algebra class. So though we are a little bit further away from our goal, it's still a good indicator that we're trending in the right direction. Global 2 does look lower than we'd hope, but does not include any of the students who take our AP classes, and ELA is on track.
Mhm.
So some of these strengths I'm parroting, but I think it's helpful with the numbers that we were seeing there. So cross assessment, something you can't really see here is that students are completing more work than we were seeing at this time last year. So some of these, the ELA exam, for example, has 2 full essays that students must take in addition to reading a number of passages and answering multiple choice questions. We're seeing more students attempt both essays. Algebra 1 is on track to exceed Unity's and the state scores last year if we continue in that direction. And the EL exam is most substantially similar to the Regents exam and was our highest performing exam overall. What we've been doing so far, reteaches in classes based on that data. School-wide, we focused on feedback to students and prioritized having students implement in the moment adjustments to their work. Living environment is using coach-created curriculum now rather than creating curriculum or using curriculum from our newer teachers' former school. And then we've used that to create strategic groupings in class and for tutoring. Mock exams are given next week all week. True mock exam conditions and true mock exams. And then from that, testing hype, tutoring groups, and adjustments to teacher scopes and sequences will be made for the rest of the year.
And so I think with that, we'll have updates on mock exams in April as well.
Yep. Questions? No?
So Jim, I think we're up to approval items.
Okay, great. If everybody could turn on their video. Got only 2 items. Let's see, how many do we need? 1, 2, 3.
I think we have quorum now. Lenny, Earl, if you're able to jump on camera for these votes, that'd be great. If not, we do have quorum.
Okay, I'm just changing my screen. Okay, I can see people now. Okay. First item is the minutes from the meeting on December 18. Are there any questions? Any changes requested? Okay, we'll put that up for approval. All in favor? Thank you. Second item, minutes from the meeting on January 31. Any questions or comments there? Okay,
No.
all in favor of approving? Thank you. Okay, public comment. I don't see anybody from the public here, so we can move on. Josh, anything you want to say about next month?
Yeah, in addition to the academic stuff we just mentioned, we will have had a Board of Regents meeting by the next time we meet. So that'll be big news. Let's see. Purchase of building related updates. I'm sure that'll be something that we talk about in April. And then some updates on staffing, I'm sure. So some big meaty topics.
Yeah.